Welcome once again to another edition of What You're Reading. People ask me all the time, hey Chuck, what are you reading? They want to know, I guess, my standpoint from a viewpoint of a professional writer, my criticisms. Sometimes they just want to start a fight between me and another writer because they'll, what do you think of this? Knowing that I won't like it. But I don't want to report on stuff I don't like, which is why there was no Whatcha reading last week. Because what I read last week was a bunch of disheartening, poorly done comics that I'm not even going to dignify with a name. So I just read some comics that just weren't very good, and it's kind of a downer. And I think we all have this feeling, whether you read comics or not. I mean, if you watch some new show or new movie on one of the streaming services, and it's such a huge disappointment that you got to turn around and watch something is good, basically to cleanse your palate, to restore your faith in the arts. And that's pretty much what I did. I turned to comic book comfort food. I started reading this massive reprint volume of Dale Evans comics from the 1950s because I knew they would at least be competently written and drawn. Now, there's an outfit called Guadalajara Comics, and what they do is they take public domain comic books, they scan them, and they put them in these relatively inexpensive collections, paperback collections, and they do a pretty good job scanning. And of course, even though some of these get a little pricey, it's a lot cheaper than buying the original comics. And I like collecting comics, that's cool, but there's a lot of comics I would just like to read. And this series of Dale Evans comics from Dell, I've always wanted to read them in Guadalajara, which is available on Amazon and available at their own website. They provided the opportunity for me to look at comics that would have cost me hundreds and hundreds of dollars to buy on eBay. And my main reason for wanting to read a series of Dale Evans comics is because Russ Manning was often the regular artist on this title. And I really like Russ Manning's work. If you're not familiar with Russ Manning, most comic book fans know about Magnus Robot Fighter, a comic book from Gold Key in the 60s, which was the brainchild of Russ Manning, who for a long time was a workhorse artist at Dell. And I always liked his fine line. He was also famous for his run of Tarzan comic books, as well as a long run on the daily and Sunday Tarzan comic strips. And of course, Manning was the first comic artist to handle Star Wars. There was a Star Wars daily and Sunday comic strip, and Manning was given the job of writing and drawing it. And it was a huge deal at the time because everybody was anxious to see more Star Wars. And Russ Manning was really the first creator to take a crack at an expanded universe, utilizing these characters. And, perfect choice coming from Magnus Robot Fighter and his ability to draw, believable aliens, machinery, and his likenesses of the main characters are pretty good. Now, and that's why I wanted to read these Dale Evans comics, because Manning, just an excellent artist, could draw just anything, believable environments, animals, vehicles. He was a big car nut. Drew a lot of cartoon magazine comics in the early 60s. And it's just his draftsmanship, that clean line, excellent clarity in the storytelling. It makes these fun stories. But the fun kind of wears off because they're rather formulaic. I think they were written by Paul S. Newman. They may have been written by Gaylord Dubois. I'm not sure. Those were the two main writers at Dell. and things get a little repetitive. For some reason in these stories, Roy Rogers is always absent. He's always away somewhere. he's off to a rodeo or touring Europe. He's left Dale behind. And Dale runs a cafe with Pat Brady, who was their TV sidekick in the 50s when they had a television show. And they run this cafe in this small town in Texas that for some reason is like the nexus of violent crime in the state. Because Dale, even though she runs a little pokey little cafe in a pokey little one-horse town, she's running into bank robbers and kidnappers and counterfeiters and all kinds of nefarious criminals, which of course she thwarts without the help from any law enforcement whatsoever. The law enforcement kind of shows up at the end when Dale's already done all the heavy lifting. so the stories get a little repetitive. That may be something the licensor insisted on, keep these stories within this kind of framework, keep showing the cafe, keep showing the Nellie Bell, the Jeep, keep showing Buttermilk, her horse, because these are all merchandising things. Roy Rogers merch was huge in the 50s. The comics and the television show were helping to sell that stuff. So maybe there was somewhat of a restriction on that. Now, not creatively restricted at all was Leonard Starr. Leonard Starr on one of the greatest comic strips, American comic strips of all time, Mary Perkins on Stage. And I picked out volume 8 to read. Ran from May 1966 till November 1967. If you're not familiar with this strip, it's unapologetically a soap opera strip. But it's so well crafted and so gorgeously drawn. Leonard Starr was another guy like Russ Manning, just a tremendous draftsman. Excellent storyteller. Had a great, as you can see here, a great feel for anatomy, panel dynamics. His characters seemed alive, a full range of facial expressions and all the rest of it. And Mary Perkins is an interesting character. She's a typical soap opera heroine, often put upon, but strong-willed. She's a capable woman, not a Mary Sue. She has her flaws. And the Starr in a lot of these stories gets into some deep psychological stuff, which was a kind of a thing in the 60s. Everybody was into psychology, and the characters in these stories are often troubled in one way or another, with one neuroses following another. And in this volume, we have stories. We have kind of a Cold War thriller with Mary somehow involved with Soviet spies. We have a story about a superhero television show, and this was at the height of the popularity of the Batman television show, so it's not hard to figure out why Starr was interested in doing that. We have Mary as a actress in both TV, movie, and stage. She's always busy, always in demand. She runs across a lot of ne'er-do-well characters, and there's a gangster character who comes in and out of her life, but he's kind of the gangster with a heart of gold, but causing all kinds of complications for her. Like I said, it's a soap opera strip, but it's a smart adult approach to the genre. It never gets overly sentimental or weepy or soapy or sloppy. The characters are engaging. There's a lot of humor. Starr had a very dry sense of humor, which his characters share, and it's just you really need to give it a try. There's a full, I think, 15 or 18 volume set available. I believe they're still relatively inexpensive, and just really nice collections shot from syndicate proofs to display this art as clearly as it deserves to be shown, because you can see here the Starr had a very fine line, and just a master comic book storyteller and comic strip storyteller. I talked about, in the last episode, I talked about this book of Popeye the Sailor Man, reprints of Bud Sajendorf stuff from 1964, 1965, and I was literally in the midst of reading it when I did the video. I've since finished the book, and I have to say I'm much more enthusiastic now. The first story wasn't that great. It was a six-month-long story in which Sajendorf has this folk singer character, because I guess that was a thing in 64, and he has this folk singer, and the story seems to go on a little bit too long, but the later stories in the book are really funny and really far more engaging and more briskly told. They don't take half a year to get from the beginning to the end, and they don't meander. They've got more solid, and they're more like a Seeger story, and more of the level of absurdity that we look forward to in a classic Popeye story. So I even more strongly recommend this collection if you've ever been curious about Sajendorf's newspaper strip run on Popeye the Sailor Man. If you want to get a hold of me, you want to maybe suggest something for me to read, or have a comment on one of these things, or defend something I didn't like, or say you're full of crap, that thing you really love is stupid, contact me at brunobookstore@gmail.com. brunobookstore@gmail.com. It's the most reliable way to reach me. And that's it for this week. I'll be back next week with more of what I've been reading.